I'm starting to sew again. It's in March, and I'm making use of my little squares. As you saw, the bins have been filling up as I've been cleaning up the remnants of the projects that I did last year. Usually I clean up and just with fabric that's left over on my desktop at the end of a project, I will cut them into squares, various sizes, and just keep them in those bins behind me, all on the shelf. And when the bins start getting filled up, I have to do something with them. So today I just picked one of the bins that was super full. It just happens to be my 3-inch square bin, but I could have picked any one of those. And all I'm going to do is, first of all, make some checkerboard type blocks, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, and just sew some together until I get enough to do something with. So what I do is just make a chain. I'm doing light, dark, light, and making 5 by 5. And I chain piece these. So I've got under my presser foot a dark on top of the light. Next, I'm just going to pick out of my pile down here one that's lighter than dark. Put it on top of that one, like so. And when I get to the end of that, I just continue right on to the next one. Next one is dark. Just pick up another one. I'm not really worried about what color goes next to the color. I just want to make sure that a light value goes next to a dark one, just because that's what I decided to do. Dark one. Sometimes I have to be careful because they're two together. And then I come to the top again. Light, dark, light, dark, light. Sometimes when I get things from people, they're not always the same size that I think they should be. That one's too small. Set it aside for a recut. This one's fine. Okay, so there's 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. So now all I do is take this top one, flip it over. They're all joined up nicely at the seams. I get the end and the end together, give it a little tug, and usually I can decide which way these seam allowances are going to go. One is going to go down, one's going to go up as I sew it, and then they'll all lie flat all the way across. It's so easy to do this. Usually on the first one, I'll do the first one under the presser foot and the bottom side comes towards me, but this time I'm going to do it the other way, just because I can. So I want the whole row that way. that's first row sewed together, and the seams match all the time. So the next one, I fold this down over there, but I can see where the top is. I just need to be able to push the bottom one in the correct direction. So I know that I want these all underneath. All I really do is hold the end of it at this end, and everything seems to lie pretty well most of the time. Now I'll just finish the last 2 rows, but you see the seam allowances all match up and they nest together at the back side, and when I give that a press, it'll just sit down nicely. And see, they all match up at the seams. It's the easiest way to do chain piecing to make checkerboards out of these squares. So I'm going to just finish a couple more of these, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do with them. So when I press them, all of those seams are nicely nested and they just lie. It seems to work like almost perfectly every time I do it. So if you've cut them out, you've sorted them, you can make blocks lickety-split. Now what am I going to do with them? 3 across and 4 down. And the measurement for that, they're 3-inch squares. So when I measure that across, it's 39, and then there's 2 seam allowances, so that'd be 38. And 52, 3 seam allowances be about 50 by 38. So if I want to make a standard bed, double-sized bed, I think what I'm going to do is just around the edges, I'm going to sew a border, and then I'll probably take some other blocks and just make some other, whatever size I need to measure. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I can't do that ahead of time. I sort of do it in my head as I'm going along, and then I just add the amount of width that I want, and I'll pick out something that's going to look nice to go around as a border here, and then I'll put that extra border around the outside. So I've got to find something in my stash that's got enough fabric to go around here twice. Right now I'm just going to sew these together as a field, and then I will come back, measure it, decide what size the border is going to be around the outside, and then decide what I'm going to do with around the outside of that to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. Sounds like a plan. I keep this record of quilt size guidelines on my computer screen as a reference, and I've measured the quilt on the wall, and now I'm going to determine what size I want to make it when it's finished, and I think I'm going to go to a double. Well, when I was looking for pieces of batting, I couldn't find any pieces that were big enough that I wouldn't have to join 20 pieces of batting together. So I went with a full piece of batting off of my new roll. So instead of doing a quilt as you go method of piecing this together, I just went whole hog and I added those 3.5-inch squares all the way around the perimeter of the first border, and then I added the other border around the outside like I said I was going to in the first place. So the inside border is 3.5 inches and the outside border is 5 inches. And as I did with the squares to begin with, I increased the size of the squares from the center to the outside. The inside part of the quilt has 3-inch squares. The outside ring around the outside has 3.5-inch squares. So as you go out farther, it's easier to make the borders, the squares, a larger size, because that will encompass the extra fabric you've added with the border. So I did what I wasn't going to do. I sewed all of the quilt pieces together and made an entire quilt. Then what I did was use the pieces of backing fabric that I had and made a backing that was large enough to do the whole quilt. And then I sandwiched the batting and the backing and quilted it just with my walking foot. And I just quilted straight line quilting. And basically, the quilt is finished now. I just have to add my binding, and I selected a dark brown color for the binding, and I'll put that on and this quilt will be done. I'll just turn it over and show you the back side. So here's the back. I used that striped fabric for the majority of the center portion. I had to add the stripe in the perpendicular mode there at the top because I didn't have enough to go the other way without having a lot of seams. So I just turned it on its side. That's not a problem. And then what I did is had a piece of batik that was in the same colorway and added a piece of that to each side to make it wide enough for the quilt that I had. And then all I have to do is put binding on that and it will be done. So all I have to do now is just add that piece of binding to go around outside and the quilt will be finished. It was a really nice project to work on. It used a lot of squares and some of my excess pieces of fabric. So I'm happy about that. It'll be a great quilt to donate to some charity. I'll see you next time. Bye.